Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of You Could Hide a Cola podcast. My name's Daniel. This is my brother Clive.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Daniel, we had some technical difficulties last week. I told everyone at the end of the episode we'll talk about everything that happened in 1834. So we'll talk about that today, but apologies for last week. There were some issues there.
Okay, we're doing 106, 107, and 108 today. Do we want to recap anything about Zion's Camp, or should we just crack straight on with a quote and get on with it?
I think we did pretty well last week. I think we just get on with it.
Okay. All right. Well, you got the quote.
Okay, yeah, Daniel, I've got the quote today. So this quote is from President Monson back in 2014.
Yeah.
And I was reading this because I was studying, obviously, for this episode, and he quotes section 107 tons, like heaps. So I don't know if it was his favorite section to quote or what, especially verse 99. So I want to just, we'll get into it later, but this is what he talked about. He said, catastrophic conflicts come and go, but the war waged for the souls of men continues without abatement. Like a clarion call comes to the word of the Lord to you, to me, and to the priesthood holders everywhere. And then he quotes 99, wherefore now let every man learn his duty, and to act in the office in which he is appointed in all diligence. Then we will be, as the Apostle Peter declared, even a royal priesthood, united in purpose and endowed with power from on high. So we're going to talk about that today, but that was just a great way that he put it.
Okay. Well, Clive, we're talking about 106 first, and we're right now at the end of 1834. It's been a very, very troubled time for the saints. They're certainly still suffering. But of course, like usual, the Lord continues to roll on with revelations for the church. And we get 1834 November in 106, and then we move to sort of 6 months later, 1835 in 107. So we are covering a large time here. But 106 is about this guy that is really unknown. I mean, if we think that William E. McClellan in Doctrine and Covenants section 66 is unknown, then Warren A. Cowdery in 106 is almost invisible. This is an entire section about him, but I think maybe we see ourselves a little bit in this. And I guess I'll just explain, my thoughts on that, Clive, as we go about. But I'll just start off and introduce it. It says, it is my will that my servant Warren A. Cowdery, brother of Oliver Cowdery, should be appointed and ordained a presiding high priest over my church in the land of freedom and the regions round about. So he's a high priest in a particular area, but not just any high priest. He's the presiding high priest. And he is given a particular section of area, a particular congregation, a particular stake, if you would. Although stakes weren't really established, but imagine that in today's terminology. And like I said, it kind of comes out of nowhere. And he's given some instruction, and he should preach. This is verse 2. Should preach my everlasting gospel and lift up his voice and warn the people, not only in his own place but in the adjoining counties. And I was thinking about that, like, this guy's really come out of nowhere. The church at this point isn't short of members. Certainly the members who are there are struggling, but it's not super short of members. But it tells him, it says to him in verse 3, Clive, he should devote all his time in seeking this high holy calling. You should be seeking diligently the kingdom of heaven and its righteousness. You should be seeking all those things that are necessary to it. For the laborer is worthy of his hire. The Lord is saying, I am qualifying. I think you are qualified to complete this work. I'm the person who's hiring in this case, and I think that you're the man for the job. And I just found it really interesting, Clive, that this section is about him. It's only 8 verses, but he kind of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, it does. You're right. And it's a really good section for referencing. Like you're referencing, you go, well, the Lord does tell us, like in verse 3, he said, devote your whole time to the high and holy calling, and again in verse 4, well, okay, this is another reference to when the Lord comes. I was saying to you, the coming of the Lord dwelleth nigh, and it overtaketh the world as a thief in the night. Like each verse here, I've used, because I've colored a lot of these in, not
Right.
referencing Warren at all, because you're right. I
Right.
mean, it's very unknown, and so I've written down a lot of things here. You know, the Lord come as a thief in the night. We need to focus on our callings, like all these sort of different things. So it's a great reference section, but it's so easy to miss what the Lord's actually saying here.
Yeah. 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 Um, there's a call out, Clive, as well, which is in a direct reference to him, um, to a positive and a negative. Verse 6, and again, verily I say unto you, there was joy in heaven when my servant Warren bowed to my scepter and separated himself from the crafts of man. So Oliver Cowdery is one of the three witnesses, and Warren doesn't join for years later. And so the revelation to Joseph Smith is heaven is there's a party going on because Warren joined, and Joseph writes it down. It becomes part of these Book of Commandments, part of our Doctrine and Covenants now. But in verse 7, therefore, blessed is my servant Warren, for I will have mercy on him, and notwithstanding the vanity of his heart, I will lift him up in as much as he will humble himself before me. So I guess it's like, I liken this to kind of all of us. You know, the Lord is stoked when even just one person comes back or one person joins the church. And I think about that story of, you know, when Christ says in the book of Luke, if you know, if you've got 100 sheep and one is lost, you know, don't you leave the 99 and go and get the one? And when the one comes, you rejoice. And in here, it's like this one guy, seemingly unknown, just one random, just me or you, any other random, so stoked that this person's come back. But the Lord in reality is also saying that I'm aware of the gaps. I'm aware of the gaps that you've got, but I will lift you up. As long as you are humble, I will lift you up and get you into this place, you know, spiritually, because I do think you are qualified for the calling. And so, out of nowhere, lots of verses that can kind of spike our interest, or spark our interest, and then we've got this verse 6 contrasting to verse 7.
So, like I said at the beginning, like this 106 is the end of 1834. Like this is the very last revelation. So, you know, obviously for this Warren, you know, he's probably stoked to be in there right at the end. So I've got this book called Opening the Heavens, and it basically breaks down everything that happened in each year. And so tons of stuff happened in 1834. So I'm not going to be able to get through all of it. But I've just picked out some of the highlights of 1834. So Zion's Camp, which we talked about, which, you know, a lot of people may have heard of, but maybe not known exactly what it was all about. So we talked about that. The first High Council of the church was called, which we talked about. And then the High Councils were organized. So that this is, you know, High Councils now. David Whitmer was called as president of the church in Joseph Smith's absence. Then there was a conference, and in the conference, it was mentioned that the church will now be called the Church of Latter-day Saints, which it was called the Church of Christ. And then again, we're going to read about it in section 115 when it changed its name again. One thing I found really interesting, because you know I love the story of Adam and Eve, Joseph Smith, Oliver Cowdery, and Zebedee Coltrane, they saw Adam and Eve in a vision. I've got this book called Adam on Diamond, and it talks about how Joseph lay down, stretched his arms out, Zebedee on one side, Oliver Cowdery on the other. They lay back in this field and looked up into heaven, and Adam and Eve came out of the clouds. It's quite incredible. So, yeah, lots and lots of things happened in 1834, but those ones I specifically picked up on.
That's quite special. I haven't heard of that story.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, really interesting. He lays down, he stretches his arms out, and they lie their heads on his arms, and they look up into the clouds.
Okay. Yeah, it's a strange image.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about 107. 107 is really, really long, 100 and something verses, 100 verses. And it gives us a breakdown about the organization, the structural organization of the priesthood. Later on, of course, Joseph would bring in the Relief Society. But at this stage, the structural organization of the priesthood is laid out pretty clearly. Um, the church is growing, as we've talked about in multiple episodes. The church is growing really fast, and the structure is not one that can be helped or aided by just one leader or one first quorum. It just can't happen. And so here the Lord now, I guess the church is ready for us to have that next structure. And so that's what we learn about in 107, amongst a few other things. First of all, Clive, a question for you. Verse 2, why the first? So it tells us that the priesthood is the Melchizedek and Aaronic. Why the first is called the Melchizedek priesthood is because Melchizedek was such a great high priest. For his day, it was called the Holy Priesthood after the order of the Son of God. Do you want to tell us anything about Melchizedek? What do we know about Melchizedek? I mean, obviously, he is the man. Like the entire priesthood with the power to act in the name of God is named after this person. Not Nephi, not Joseph Smith, not Moses, not Abraham. None of these people, but Melchizedek. And so he must have been extremely special.
He definitely was extremely special. And, there isn't much about Melchizedek. There's a lot that you can sort of pick from, but there's really not much in the overall. Like you said, like we know tons about Moses, Noah.
Where is he in the
tons.
timeline, perhaps?
In the timeline, he's he's really right at the beginning. Like he's right at the beginning there with, after Noah sort of thing. He was the very first person in the Bible to be called a priest. So, obviously, he was around the time, I guess he's old enough to have seen Abraham. But Abraham was quite young when he first saw him. So, because we talked about Abraham in the scripture, talks about how he gave tithes to him. A lot of people believe that he was Shem, that Melchizedek is a title, because Melchizedek means king of righteousness. That's what Melchizedek means. So he was the king of Salem. And so a lot of people go, okay, well, all of this timeline works out to be Shem, the son of Noah. But right. Joseph Fielding Smith, he said, this is false doctrine. So we know that's not true.
I thought you were about to educate me.
Well, no, in the course of the timeline, he's old enough to know who Shem is, because everyone believes he's Shem, but he's also old enough to know Abraham. So he's in that in-between stage there. He was... It predates obviously Aaron and Levi and the Levites and all those. Yeah. So the Melchizedek priesthood was called after him because of just his greatness. He was the king of Salem. He was the first ever priest. People would come to him and people would give him tithes. Like he was the equivalent of a prophet, but it seems a bit different to just a prophet. Like obviously Noah was the head of the dispensation, and then Abraham was the head of his dispensation. So to me, it's almost
like a great patriarch or something.
Exactly,
like this.
And that's what I was thinking. I thought maybe he was a patriarch at the time, because I mean, who else could he have been? But he was most definitely a high priest, and we know that for sure. But yeah, that's basically as much as we know about Melchizedek. Not much, unfortunately.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, Clive. Then it tells us, out of respect and reverence, the name was changed so that the name of the high priesthood was changed to not be too frequently saying the Son of God. So we learn that.
I just want to mention as well that, speaking of what you're speaking of, why the name was changed. In Hebrews chapter 7, verse 3, the Joseph Smith translation one, it gives a bit of detail about that. It says, For this Melchizedek was ordained a priest after the order of the Son of God, which order was without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, and all those who are ordained unto this priesthood are made like unto the Son of God, abiding a priest continually. So that's why it was called the order of the Son of God, because that's what it is, and that's plain what it is. And then, like you said, obviously it was changed to be the Melchizedek priesthood. But, Hebrews 7:3, that's a really, really good verse there. But obviously it's a Joseph Smith translation, so you just can't just use it to a Jehovah's Witness.
Oh. Okay, so then it tells us, Clive, in verse 5, all other authorities or officers in the church are appendages to this priesthood, to the priesthood of Melchizedek. So we are, if we transport ourselves back to 1835, we don't know this. We're new members. We're 100% converts. No one is yet to be born into the church and be able to have any kind of knowledge. Of course, um, Joe, there is the babies are born. I was just about to say Joseph F. Smith, but that is a few years down the track. But babies are born, but no one's educated. Anyway, that's my point. Everyone is new. So now we would go, of course, the Melchizedek priesthood, but actually back then it was unknown. So then it tells us, Clive, in 6, but there are 2 divisions or grand heads. One is the Melchizedek, and the other is the Aaronic or Levitical priesthood. The office of the elder comes under the priesthood of Melchizedek. This is what I was kind of referring to at the start, that the 107 structurally breaks down where everyone sits in the priesthood, and it gives quite a clear summary, but not completely clear. And the reason I say that is we'll talk about 70s in a moment. There has been times in the church in the late 1800s that you couldn't be a deacon unless you were first called a 70. And there's recently, there's people I know now who are in their 60s and 70s. They had to be called a 70 before they could become a high priest. So it's not always been as what we know it today, but there's been kind of a morphing of, while this is a summary, like I mentioned, it doesn't specify every single calling and where every single calling sits and what have you got to be first and what's higher and what's lower. So it isn't just cut and dry, and that kind of stuff has happened in our church's history, as of recent as probably 40, 50 years ago.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because like section 107 isn't from one vision. Like this is, what was I said at the beginning, it's from 1831 up to 1835. Like it's all these visions intertwined that Joseph can finally put in an order and say, okay, this is how it all works. But it's interesting as well, like reading the Doctrine and Covenants has made me really truly understand how revelation is received. It's not God says, okay, this is how I want things done. It's the prophets going to the Lord saying, okay, how do I do this? And then he gives them the answer. So like there's a structure and there's a way to do everything, but we've got to ask first before the Lord comes down and just, babies, as it says, okay, gather around, this is how you got to do everything. He said, no, come to me and then I'll explain everything to you. And so what you're saying there, it's changed again. Well, the Lord obviously has a way of doing it, but maybe we're just not asking in the right way, or whatever it may be. I'm not saying that the prophet's doing it wrong. Definitely don't get me wrong there. But
I feel like you might be.
But I'm just saying it's just an interesting way the revelation comes. It's we go and we ask, and then the Lord says, okay, now you've asked, I will tell you.
Right. I guess I'm just going to go through, Clive. I've got a bunch of stuff highlighted that I wanted to bring up and just see what you thought. But there's a few interesting things in here. Verse 10, high priests after the order of Melchizedek priesthood have a right to officiate in their own standing under the direction of the presidency. So there's a presidency of these high priests in administering spiritual things. In 11, an elder has a right to officiate in his stead when the high priest is not present. So it is giving some overview here of what's supposed to happen, how things are supposed to be. I think it says in our handbook, if the bishop on a Sunday is presiding and he's got no counselors, then the elders quorum president is supposed to be with him on the stand.
Okay.
I think. Well, I'm pretty sure. So I guess that's what I'm thinking. That's what came to my mind here. An elder has a right to officiate in his stead. So the bishop's there and he's officiating. His 2 counselors who are high priests are not. So the elders quorum president's there. And then if he's not there, the elders quorum president can actually conduct. If the bishop isn't available, a high priest can conduct sacrament. And if a high priest isn't available, an elders quorum president can conduct. And this happened to me once. I was in a ward. I think I was speaking in that ward, and no one from the bishopric was there. We knew no one from the bishopric was there. And so the stake president said, Daniel, you're going to be speaking to the ward. Can you conduct as well? And it was really strange because I was just traveling to this ward and then I was conducting sacrament. And I remember saying to them, because they were kind of like, who on earth are you? And I started off the sacrament by saying, the backup isn't here. So you've got me. And that's kind of how it all flows. So I thought that was interesting that these things are all built in as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just shows that there's always a plan. Like the Lord hasn't gone, and if that doesn't work, everyone goes home, or whatever it is, or just do what you want. Just
sometimes on
work.
A Sunday we're like, oh, let this be that we can go home.
Yeah.
We once had the water. We once had no water at the chapel.
That happened to us as well. Yeah,
did it?
No water, so they sent us home after sacrament.
Well, I said to Bishop, we can't. There's like hundreds of people that are coming. I don't think we can have sacrament. Like, people need to use the bathroom, get like what's doing, and I don't even remember if we ended up having sacrament. I think it was like everyone's going home. See you later.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But I'm sure being a good member like I am, I'm sure we came straight home and had sacrament.
Of course. Gather around, everyone.
The chapel's got no water. Everyone back to my place. All right. Okay. A few other things. 15 and 16, Clive. I'm just going to throw some things at you and just see what you think. Can we just
jump back to 14 before you do 15 and 16?
Okay.
Because we've talked about this before, because it was difficult, right, for me to study this one, even though, it, obviously very, very interesting. But we've talked about it so many times, like, what was section 84, talks about the priesthood, 27 or something like that. Anyway, but verse 14 here, we talked about how the Aaronic priesthood isn't less than the Melchizedek priesthood. It's like a preparatory thing. But I think it explains it really well here. Why is it called the lesser priesthood? It is because it is an appendage of the greater or Melchizedek priesthood and has power in administering outward ordinances. And I want to talk about that later when we get to 20, what that means.
Outward, always helping others, right?
Exactly. And so it's, saying that it's an appendage and it's to help others. So, we talked about how it's a sort of a preparatory one to receive the Melchizedek priesthood, but, you don't see the young men going, okay, we've got the Aaronic priesthood, come to us if you need us. They're always asked to go out and to minister and do all these things, and that's their role. And
sacrament to someone who can't attend church.
Exactly. Yeah, and so I want to talk about it when we get to 20, about what that means. But yeah, let's keep going, 15 and 16.
Yeah, so this one is kind of, if people don't know, the bishopric is the presidency of this priesthood and holds the keys or authority of the same. So we talk about keys, and in the wards, the keys are held by the bishop. The bishop is the key holder. No man has a legal right to this office to hold the keys of this priesthood except he be a literal descendant of Aaron. We've talked about this a few times now, where a literal descendant of Aaron, although we don't know any, has the right. Doesn't mean they instantly get called, of course, to being the bishop, but they can be called upon if required. And then the other one was the bishop, and now I've lost it. It was in my head just then. But the bishop is also the president of the Aaronic priesthood.
Yeah, halfway through 17, yeah.
Halfway through 17. I knew it was around there somewhere. So, for people who don't know, the bishop is the president of the priest quorum. He's the president of the Aaronic priesthood. So he sits, and in teachers and deacons, there's usually a president of the deacons quorum, and they would have a couple of counselors and secretary, depending on how many members are in their quorum, in their ward. But in the priest quorum, the bishop is the president of the priest quorum, and he has a first and second assistant, not first and second counselors. So just a little different to people who might not know that the bishop is connected and is the president of the priest quorum.
I always thought when we were in when we were in young men,
like just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, not that long ago. I was always grey. I always thought they just give you these callings of, assistant and first and second, like councils and all that. And I just thought it was just something, just to make you feel good. But when you look at scriptures like this, like we talk about the Aaronic priesthood as like a preparatory thing for Melchizedek, but that was the same thing as well. It's not just, all right, you're going to be the head of the young men's and you've got to call presidents just to make you feel like you're part of the big group. It is something that's important. It is a preparatory thing, and it is something that's always been. And so it's not just, let's throw in a calling to help out the young men to feel good. It's actually something very, very important.
Yeah, totally. I remember I was the president of the deacons quorum, actually having responsibilities and having counselors, and we had real responsibilities. We had to, obviously we have to pass the sacrament. A deacon has to be sitting with the bishop when the talks are going on, in case there's any kind of messages that go around. They're counting you're often counting the congregation size, but also then there's helping with the sacrament to people who aren't home. There's also ministering to people who are not coming to church. Ministering to the one by one. They're still important. And I remember as a deacon, instantly assigned to be with an elder to go and do home teaching back then. And so you're instantly a part of this world as just a 12-year-old. Well, now 11. Now you can be called in even earlier.
Yeah, it is great, and it is and it's not just for the sake of it. It is important. I want to look at 18, Daniel, in verse. I mean, we got 100 here, so I don't know how we're going to go through this, but there's something I want to point out. I might just go 18 and then 20 and just see here. So it says that the power and authority of the higher or Melchizedek priesthood is to hold the keys of all spiritual, and I've got spiritual underlined, spiritual blessings of the church. And then I just want to jump over to 20, which we can go back if you want, but I just want to jump over to the power and authority of the lesser or Aaronic priesthood. So we're talking about the spiritual or the Melchizedek priesthood. The Aaronic priesthood is to hold the keys of ministering of angels, to administer in outward ordinances the letter of the gospel, the baptism of repentance, the remission of sins, agreeable to the covenants and commandments. So it lists a few things there that the Aaronic priesthood is, but I think it's really interesting how it says that the letter of the gospel for the Aaronic priesthood and the spiritual blessings of the church for the Melchizedek priesthood. It's almost like when you're the Aaronic priesthood, this is what you have to do. Like this is the line. All right. But when you had the Melchizedek priesthood, you had that opportunity to sort of spread out a bit more and to have the Spirit going, okay, what do you feel is necessary? I don't know. That's why I sort of feel like it's like when Moses came down with the higher law and the people couldn't follow it. So he said, okay, here's a lesser law. Here's the 10 Commandments. When you can follow the 10 Commandments well, then you can get the higher law. And that's when Christ came and, fulfilled it. And I feel like that's the same with the Aaronic priesthood. Here's your preparatory to be a Melchizedek priesthood holder. Follow the letter. When you can follow this straight letter and of the law and do exactly what you should, then you get this spiritual law that is available for all. And, you can go out and you can use it in the way that you're supposed to use it.
Clive, a couple of verses here that became an issue when Joseph Smith died, when Joseph Smith was martyred. 23, the 12 traveling counselors are called to be the 12 apostles or special witnesses of the name of Christ in all the world, thus differing from the other officers in the church in the duties of their calling. And they form a quorum equal in authority to the power of the three. And it says here that, and they form a quorum equal in authority and power to the three previously mentioned. 70s are also called to preach the gospel and to be a special witness unto the Gentiles, thus differentiating from other officers in the church of the duties of their calling. Now, this is here, this section is called upon when Joseph is no longer, and they're wondering who's the successor of the church. Is it going to be Sidney Rigdon? Is it going to be James Strang? Is it going to be Brigham Young? Who is actually going to be the person? And this section here, actually, 107, is used as, well, they're of the same. The 12 are the leaders when the first quorum aren't there anymore. And essentially, Joseph and Hiram, the first quorum is basically gone, And so this is what is used as, well, Brigham Young is the head of the 12, therefore he is the successor to the presidency of the church.
Yeah, right. Interesting. And we stick to that now, and yeah, because I was thinking about that. I was thinking about, okay, who would be next, and I think it was Elder Oaks would be next. But the president of the church calls his counselors, but the counselors aren't any specific order, are they?
No.
They're just called, but the president is always the president, which is the next one. Yeah.
Yeah. So at the moment, because President Oaks would be the president of the Quorum, I think that's why we've got Jeffrey R. Holland as acting president right
Right.
now. Okay, Clive. Then we've got, well, we've been talking for a little while. We're not really through much, but 27 to 32 is interesting. It's decision making, how decisions are come about in the Quorum, in the Quorum of the 12. That is. So how are decisions made? Unanimous voices. In 30, it says that they have to be holy, holiness, lowliness of meekness, long suffering, in faith, virtue, knowledge, temperance, godliness, brotherly kindness. So it tells us that if we're just continuing to move along.
Can I just mention something about the calling of the 70? Here's a number that I found very interesting. So Joseph Smith talked about the calling of the 70, which I'm not going to read, but I'll read what Joseph Smith said. If the first 70 are all employed, so they're all busy, and there is a call for more laborers, it will be the duty of the 7 presidents of the first 70 to call and order another 70 and send them forth to labor in the vineyard until, if needs be, they set apart 7 times 70, and even until there are, this is a number, 144,000 thus set apart for the ministry.
70s, 144,000.
144,000, which is that number in Revelations, the number that Jehovah's Witnesses believe are going to heaven. 144,000. Oh. That's the limit that we get to amount of 70s in the world.
Well, I'm not going to guess, but there might be 9 or 10 or 11 groups of 70s.
Right.
Like we've got a 70 here on the Gold Coast. Elder Ormsby is our 70 here on the Gold Coast. He just moved over from New Zealand. Elder Barton down in Sydney. I don't know what he's 70, something in Oceania. But there's 70s all around the place, and there's the 70, the Quorum of 70, like the president of the 70, and then around the world there's the 5th group of 70, these people, the 9th group of 70, these people.
Right.
I don't know what our region, Australia or Oceania is. I don't know what number it is.
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess 8th. But I got no idea.
Throw it out there.
Yeah. Clive, I was going to go into 34.
Yep.
I don't want to go through too many more. Cause I've gone through a lot. I'm interested in what you've got as well, because I know I'm guessing you're going to be very interested in the Ages and the Enoses and the Methuselahs.
I do have a list of
Is that right?
Yeah, I do have a list.
Good.
Yeah.
34. The 70 are to act under the name of the Lord, under the direction of the 12, or the traveling high council, in building up the church and regulations, all the affairs of the same of the nation in all nations, first unto the Gentiles, then to the Jews, the 12 being sent out, holding the keys to open the door by the proclamation of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and first unto the Gentiles, then unto the Jews. Okay, so what does this mean? The 70 act under the direction of the 12. Elder Bednar was here not long ago with Elder Mora and Elder Jaggy. Elder Mora was our local 70. Elder Jaggy is our area presidency. And Elder Bednar in that talk said, I've got 2 70s here with me, and they're 12. With their assignment, they're essentially a 12 because he's assigned them this area and he's given them the responsibility. So they're essentially a traveling apostle. They're acting on direction of. And I thought that was really interesting in terms of, we often get really caught up in the layers of who's where. But Elder Bednar was saying, well, I'm an ordained apostle. I'm giving them authority. They're acting as a 12 under what I want them to do. And so I found that interesting. The other point to make with the 12 and the 70 as well is they have no area of assignment. So we, in this section, Clive, we keep talking about the 12 are traveling, the traveling 70, the traveling this, the traveling that. That means they're not assigned to a stake. They're not assigned to an area. So they can be assigned to wherever it is that the Lord needs them. And that is their present area of assignment. And they can be changed. They can be moved depending on where they are required to be at that time.
One thing I will actually mention, in 39, we talk about the evangelical minister that was called. It is the duty of the 12 and the large branches of the church to ordain evangelical ministers as they should be designed unto them by revelation. And obviously this is patriarchs. And you'll know more about this story than me, because I just found it yesterday, that in 1833, while at the printing press dedication, Joseph called Joseph Sr. and ordained him as the first patriarch at the printing press.
And then gave him a patriarchal blessing there and then?
There and then, yeah. That's amazing. At the printing press, it just seems so like in a random place, but I guess if you're already dedicating something, the Spirit's already there, so.
Right.
That was interesting.
Well, let's get on to these biblical things.
Okay, all right, I'll be quick. So this is talking about, we talked about this a few weeks ago as well. In fact, I think one of our pedigree charts was put on there. It was either mine or yours. But this is basically the pedigree chart from Adam. So we're not going to go through all the ages.
The priesthood lineage, or is it priesthood lineage, right?
Well, yeah, it's who called who, basically. So Adam was given the priesthood, then he gave it to Seth, Enos, Canaan, Malaleel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah. Then Seth ordained Malek, and then Methuselah ordained Noah. Now, Noah obviously was born 3 years after Adam died, so they didn't get that connection, but everyone else was there with Adam. And so it's interesting there that it takes like 10 or 11 sections to go through this. So obviously there's an important message written in there somewhere about why. And maybe, like we talked about last time, maybe it's just showing the lineage of how it all is from the beginning. But then it goes on to talk about how Adam called his posterity together, Adam on Diamond, and bestowed his last blessing. This is when he was very old. He even talks about how he was hunched over, very old, speaking to him. And then the Lord appears to him. So I imagine that, in my mind, I imagine that Adam is sort of in the middle and everyone's surrounding him, sort of like, depending on how you do it at Elders Quorum, there's someone there in the middle and everyone's surrounding them. But then the Lord appears in the middle, and he blessed Adam, and he called Adam Michael the Archangel, and that's where we first get Michael the Archangel, and we know that Michael was there with the Lord in the beginning. And one thing that it mentions, Daniel, is 57, verse 57. These things, so this is talking about Adam and all his posterity and all that. These things were all written in the book of Enoch and are to be testified in due time. Now, I have two different books of Enoch. They're similar, but they're different, and neither of them mention it, which just shows that there's even more books out there that we don't have. So it really, really interesting how, there's so much doctrine within here. There's a book of Enoch that we don't have. Here's the posterity. Seth ordained Lamech and Methuselah ordained Noah. Like, these are the things that they're learning at the same time as trying to learn the priesthood. And I just think it sums up really well in 99 about what Joseph is trying to explain, which I read at the beginning. And it must be President Monson's favorite verse, because he references it so many times, where he says, "Wherefore now let every man learn his duty, and to act in the office in which he has been appointed in all diligence." So everything that you read at the beginning, you talked about, that is your duty. And we need to understand our duty and to act in it. And I guess that's why it's all written down here in such a big format from 1831 until now. So Joseph can say, okay, this is how it all works.
Interesting. Well, I think that's probably all we've got time for, Clive. Section 108 we didn't get to. It's about a guy called Lyman Sherman who gets called. He ends up getting called as an apostle, but he would actually die beforehand. He died very young, actually. But have a read of that. But I think we should wrap it up. We appreciate everyone joining us for another episode. If you could hide to Colo podcast, catch us on YouTube and subscribe to us there, and Facebook and Instagram as well, and all the other places, the audio places like Spotify and Apple Music where we're held. We'll see you next week as we continue our journey.